All right, let's jump right in. I want you to picture this scene. A community center in La Mesa, New Mexico, and it is packed. The air is just thick with tension. You've got these developers on one side pitching this huge tech project they're calling Project Jupiter. And on the other side, you've got the community, and they are skeptical to say the least. They've got some serious questions about what this means for their home. So you can see, this isn't your average town hall. It's really a clash between the shiny, high-tech future and the very real, right-now concerns of the people who actually live there. And boom, right out of the gate, before things even really get started, a resident cuts right to the chase with this question. This is it. This is the one fear that's hanging over this entire meeting: water. I mean, think about it. We're talking about a desert community. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is more important.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this whole chaotic meeting, we're gonna break it all down. First, we'll look at what this Project Jupiter even is. Then we'll dive into that massive question about water. After that, we'll check out the big promises, jobs, money, all that good stuff. We'll also see how they plan on powering this whole thing. And finally, we'll get into the real core of the problem, this huge trust gap between what the community needs and what the company is willing to offer.
So first things first, what in the world is Project Jupiter? Well, the folks behind it are calling it a next-generation data center campus. But listen, they're not just selling a building here. They're pushing this thing as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, something that could totally transform the economy for the entire area. And they're not just talking a big game. They've put a number on it. That is, well, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about a proposed investment of $165 billion. Yeah, that's billion with a B. Now, a number that huge, it definitely gets your attention, right? But it also cranks up the stakes and, you guessed it, the skepticism through the roof. So you might be asking, what does $165 billion actually buy for the community? Well, here's the pitch. The developers are promising a ton of money directly to the county for things like schools and roads. They're talking about 2,500 construction jobs, which is huge. And here's the kicker: 750 permanent jobs with an average salary of $100,000 a year. I mean, you look at that on paper, and it really does look like a total game changer.
But here's the thing. No matter what shiny promise they put on the table, the conversation always came back to one simple fact. You can hear it from residents over and over again. We live in a desert. And that right there brings us to the project's single biggest problem: water.
So to try and calm everyone's fears, the developers made a big deal about their technology. They kept saying, hey, Project Jupiter is different. You see, most data centers use something called evaporative cooling, which guzzles millions of gallons of water every day. But they claim this campus will use a special closed-loop system.
Okay, so what even is a closed-loop system? The idea is pretty simple, actually. Imagine a cooling system where the water is just contained and goes around and around. Once you fill it up that first time, the amount of new water it needs is tiny. We're talking just enough for, sinks and toilets for the people working there. So in theory, it's a massive improvement for saving water.
Right. Sounds great in theory. But the people at this meeting, they weren't buying theories. They wanted facts. They wanted hard numbers. Cut to the chase. How much water is this thing actually going to use?
Okay, so here are the numbers the company finally gave. They're projecting about 20,000 gallons a day on average. Now, to put that in perspective, that's roughly what 100 homes might use. Or, to use a local example, it's about what it takes to water just 5 to 8 acres of pecan trees. So, on the surface, those numbers, they seem kind of reasonable, right?
But, and this is a big but, this is the exact moment where the trust really started to fall apart. Someone asked a very simple question. Okay, so how much water does it take to fill the whole system up the very first time? And the company's guy had no answer. He literally said, I don't know right now. And that one moment, that admission, it became this huge symbol for everything the community was afraid of.
So with this giant question mark hanging over the water issue, the conversation moved on to those big promises about money and jobs. The real question became, who's actually going to benefit from all this? Is it going to be the local folks in Doña Ana County, or is all this opportunity going to go to people from out of town?
Let's just zero in on this number for a second. 750. That's the number of permanent, high-paying jobs they're dangling. This is really the core of their entire sales pitch. It's the promise of a whole new future for hundreds of local families, right? A better quality of life?
But then someone in the audience asks a simple but very sharp question that kind of pokes a hole in that whole beautiful picture. Are these jobs actually guaranteed for people who live in New Mexico?
And the answer they got, from a county official no less, was pretty blunt. Basically, no. There's no legal way to force the company to hire locals. He said the best they could do was insist that they create incentives and train people down the road. But, for someone who needs a job now, hearing about a talent pipeline for the future, that's just not the guarantee they were looking for.
All right, so after water and jobs, what's next? Well, the conversation turned to another huge resource this project would need: power. And I mean a staggering amount of it to run a data center this big. And of course, that opened up a whole new can of worms when it comes to environmental worries. So Project Jupiter's plan is to build its own private power grid, completely separate from the local utility company. Now, to make sure the lights always stay on, they're going to start by using natural gas. But the plan also includes this huge battery storage project, and they have to follow state law, which says they need to be totally zero carbon by 2045. So it's this kind of mix of old school fuel and futuristic tech.
But are you sensing a pattern here? Just like with the water, a really important piece of the puzzle was missing. Residents pointed out that the company was supposed to provide an environmental impact study as part of their application, but they hadn't. So without that study, nobody really knows what the true environmental cost of this private power plant is going to be.
So you've got these missing pieces piling up, right? The missing water number, the non-guaranteed jobs, the missing environmental study, and all of this led to the real climax of the meeting. It stopped being about the specific details and became about something much bigger, a fundamental breakdown of trust.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the problem. On one hand, you have the residents, and they are demanding solid, legally binding guarantees. But on the other hand, the developers dropped this bomb. They're still competing with other states to even get the project. They say they can't make any firm promises until they've officially won the contract. And you can imagine how that landed with the community, right? It felt like they were being asked to sign a blank check.
So, as this tense meeting wrapped up, there were just these huge, critical questions left hanging in the air. Question number one: when is anyone actually going to see that full environmental impact statement? Question two: what is that magic number, the exact volume of water it's going to take to fill up that cooling system for the first time?
And maybe the biggest question of all, what if this whole thing fails? If the project just gets abandoned in 10 or 20 years, are there any legal or financial protections in place to make sure the community isn't left with the mess?
At the end of the day, it all comes down to this one incredibly tough question. And it's not just a question for the folks in New Mexico. It's for communities everywhere. How do you balance a once-in-a-lifetime economic opportunity against the very real and sometimes totally unknown risks to the things you can't live without?